Good evening. Hi, it's Trudy, and I'm here tonight with Numbers uh, chapters 3 and 4. Um, Here, what we're going to talk about tonight is the priests and the Levites. We started off with the initial uh, census, of the children of Israel and how they actually were actually divided. So tonight, we're going to go a little further in depth into the roles and responsibilities. So the first verse through the fourth verse says, Now these are the records of Aaron and Moses when the Lord spoke with Moses on Mount Sinai, and these are the names of the sons of Aaron: Nadab, the firstborn, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. These are the names of the sons of Aaron, the anointed priests, whom he consecrated to minister as priests. Nadab and Abihu had died before the Lord when they offered profane fire before the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai, and they had no children. So Eleazar and Ithamar ministered as priests in the presence of Aaron, their father. So basically, it's kind of the scripture talks about what actually happened. Aaron had four children, four sons, because remember, as we talk about this, it is the male child that actually counts. It is the one that actually adds value to the family. So he lost two of his sons because they did not come to God appropriately, and they presented themselves in profane fire to God in an unacceptable way, and God consumed them with the fire. And he actually, they died. It was just that cut and dry. They were no longer there. He only had the two sons, which was Eleazar and Ithamar. Then it goes into 5 and 10. It talks about their particular roles in relationship to Aaron. And we all know that Aaron was actually anointed and was actually the high priest at this particular time. So it says, And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Bring the tribe of Levi near and present them before Aaron the priest, that they may serve him, that they may shall attend to his needs in the whole congregation before the tabernacle to do the work of the tabernacle. They also shall attend to all of the furnishings of the tabernacle of the meetings, give the Levites to Aaron and his sons. They were given entirely to him from the children of Israel. So shall appoint Aaron and his sons that they shall attend to their priesthood, but the outsiders who shall come near shall be put to death. Good evening, Sister Lynette. So what we have here that's interesting was that the tribe of Levi was actually, we'll see that it is a tribe that was chosen by God. You know, God usually chose the firstborn of everything, but he made an exemption for the tribe of Levi because the tribe of Levi serve the priesthood. That was their particular role. God called out that particular tribe specifically for that, to serve the priest and the tabernacle. This was their whole existence. This is why um, God picked them, and we'll go further and talk about um, actually how did that tribe actually break out, because the Levite family actually consisted of three sons. It was Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Those were the three sons that he actually had. So when they said attend to the needs, that meant that they acted as armor bearers, they acted as security guards, they acted as everything that needed to be done. They would be all, do all, because they had no other interest outside of taking care of uh, the priests and the tabernacle. That was their sole responsibility of what they had to do. Then when we go back to 11 through 13, it talks about the Levites being a special possession of God. That God, we already know that he lays claim to the firstborn of the animals, of everything. The firstborns were to be dedicated to him. But every thing that came to him, he claimed it this way. But this was not necessarily the firstborn. This was a whole entire tribe that God actually chose for himself. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel instead of every firstborn. So we see here, God is reaffirming that he did it himself. There was no other choice than what he had actually made. Then it goes down and says, I sanctify to myself all of the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. They shall be mine, for I am the Lord. So he's reaffirming that he had the right to do what he did. But here he chose, instead of the firstborn of every womb that opened up, he chose them as his particular pick. And he did that instead of pulling the firstborn that way. So this is how the Levites start to come into importance as we start to go further through this. Then they started the census on the tribe of Levi. So it says, Then God spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, Number the children of Levi by their father's house, by their families, you shall number every male from 1 month old and above. So Moses numbered them according to the word of the Lord as he commanded. So there were sons of Levi, and their names were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And these are the names of the sons of Gershon. He had Libni and Shemiah, and the sons of Kohath by their families, Amram, Ishar, Hebron, and Uziel. And the sons of Merari by the families were Mali and Mushi. And these were of the house of the Levites. So we see that what happened is that they procreated, they had children, that generations will actually take care of the tabernacle. God is so efficient with what he does. He makes sure that there is enough to go around. It's just not just one and done. He made sure that there was a legacy, that his work would continue on. So it was interesting that they counted every person from the age of 1 month and above. And normally you wouldn't count a 1 year old, because see, before, when they were counting the actual tribes, they were counting the tribes for military strength. A 1 month old can't do anything in the military, so that but because they were chosen, there was a calling on their lives. So every person that was in that particular lineage was actually accounted for. Then we move on, and then it talks about the census and the duties of the family of Gershon. Now, from Gershon, the family of Libnites, and the family of Shemites, there were the families of the Gershonites. So we got the Gershonites now. Those who were numbered according to the number of all the males from 1 month and above, of those who were numbered, there were 7,500. Okay. So what we start to find out is that the family of the Gershonites were to camp. We had directions yesterday. Sister Net was giving us different directions of where the tribes were actually placed at. Here we continue to do this. Now we see the families of the Gershonites were to camp behind the tabernacle on the western side, or on the west side behind the tabernacle. And they actually had 7,500 males that were actually accounted in this particular census. And this was between the tribe of Ephraim and the tabernacle. So there was strategic placement for each person, and God's the master planner. He's got all the blueprints that of where he needs to have people placed. And then we look at the duties of the children of Gershon. They were supposed to take care of the skins that covered the tabernacle itself. And then they would also do disassembly and transport and assembly and upkeeping of the tents and the coverings and the screens, hangings, and their cords. So every particular family had a particular duty. When God called them, he called them not for today, but forever, that they would actually do this, and this would be their role and responsibility. Then later it goes on to the census and the duties of the Kohaths. And then we have the same thing where we actually have all of the children from 1 month old until and above, as they said. and their number was 8,600 males that were actually in their particular clan or tribe, whichever way that you actually had it. And the Kohites were Eliphaz, the son of Uziel. Their duty include the ark, the table, the lampstands, the altars, the utensils of the sanctuary, which were ministered with, the screens, and all the work gathering them together. And then we see here that at this particular point, there is a foreman or a boss or manager that's actually appointed at this point. This is where Eleazar, who is the son of Aaron, is actually put in charge. And he was to be the chief over the leaders of the Levites. So Gershon, Kohath, and Merari actually reported to Eleazar. So this is where it's telling us at this point. And they actually resided on the south side of the tabernacle, which actually was between the tribe of Reuben and the tabernacle. So we see everybody strategically placed. Now, one of the things that it spoke of earlier was that their role was to protect the tabernacle at all costs. And if a stranger or someone that was not supposed to be in that area, they were given a charge to kill them, to put them to death. So this was a very serious role because it's more than just moving service, that you're invested in the move of God and how important that it was. Now, one of the things that was interesting when I was studying this, they talked about the families of Amoramites, and the Amoramites remind us of the family of Aaron and Moses, and Aaron is an Amorite. The presence of the family of the Amorites suggests that the Amron is not the direct father of Aaron, Miriam, and Moses, but actually an ancestor. So, actually, only because of God's grace and God's appointment could Aaron and Moses actually take the role, because they were not in the direct lineage that they should have been. Um, and they were actually from the family of the Kohath, of the tribe of Levi. So this is where we say that God can appoint whoever. You never have to discount yourself and say that I'm not worthy, because God can call and appoint who he wants to. Look at Moses and look at Aaron, the great job they were actually called to do, and they moved under God's provision and grace. And what they actually did was that the Kohites, they actually had the Ark of the Covenant, and it talked about how they would actually move things, and the sole responsibility was theirs, and to make sure that it arrived from place to place, because as they were moving, following the pillar of clouds to know where to go, this is what they have to pack up and move wherever they're going. And it was not an easy fate, because you have to remember that the house of God was a glamorous place. It had all of the fineries of everything. Then we go on to Merari, and it is the same thing that we're going through, looking at the census and the duties of Merari. And then the leaders of the father's house of the families of Merari were Zuriel, the son of Abihail, and there were the camps on the north side of the tabernacle. And they appointed the duties of these particular people, that they had the boards of the tabernacle, the bars, its pillars, sockets, its utensils, and all the working relating to to them, and the pillars of the court all around them, with the sockets and the pegs and the cords. And Merari actually had 6,200 males that they were accounted for. They were on the north side of the temple, located next to the tribe of Dan and the tabernacle itself. So they were interwoven all through with the particular placement that has been predestined. But you see, they all have very specific jobs. It was not a guessing game. Okay, what am I supposed to do? They knew exactly what they had to do. Then it had the camp of the priests, and it says, moreover, those who were to camp before the tabernacle on the east, before the tabernacle or meeting, were Moses, Aaron, and his sons keeping charge of the sanctuary to meet the needs of the children of Israel, but the outsiders who came near were put to death. All who numbered of the Levites, whom Moses and Aaron numbered at the commandment of the Lord. Now remember the Lord, I said before, the Lord chose them. So this is what the commandment, Moses is going through what God has said. And then it says that from 1 month old to above were 22,000 people that were in service for the actual temple. So we're talking about a whole production. God had this figured out so that it would be no hiccups, nobody calling in, nobody saying, I'm sick. We have enough people to make sure that everything was actually done. And then the uniqueness about the placement of them being on the east side was that the sun rises in the east, and the morning sun would shine first on the entrance of the tabernacle of the holy place as a symbol of the life-giving light that God actually provides. So everything is strategic. Everything that's strategic. Nothing is just willy-nilly. It is all for a reason. And we all know that the priests and the Levites, they all worked for the glory and honor of God. And everyone had an essential service of what they actually did. Okay, then we go on to 41 through 51 is the exchange of the first born. Then the Lord said to Moses, number all the firstborn males of the children of Israel from 1 month old and above, and take the number of their names, and you shall take the Levite for me. I am the Lord, instead of all of the firstborn among the children of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites, instead of all the firstborns among the livestock of the children of Israel. So Moses numbered all the firstborn among the children of Israel as the Lord had commanded him. Let's skip down a little bit because there it says, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the Levites instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and the livestock, and the Levites instead of the livestock, and the Levites shall be mine. I am the Lord. So here again, you see that he's making it plain that they belong to him, and that there will be no mix up about who and where they should be counted. And for, and then he says, and Israel, who are the number of the Levites, you shall take 5 shekels for each shekel of 20 gerahs, and you shall give the money with which the excess number of those who were over and above those who were redeemed by the Levites. So there was actually money that came in that redeemed, that we talked about this before, that the money that actually came in helped to actually finance the treasury, so that they had monies or funds to do different things, to help different people out and things like this. So God always has a master plan on how he does everything that he does, and that his house will not go lacking, not at all, at no matter what we're looking at. And then when we look at the extra, there were actually 273 firstborn sons that were actually assigned a value in the money. We talked about that back in 26 of our previous study, that there was value actually. Because why? Because when they chose these people, they were looking at them as being in the prime of their actual lives, and that there was worth assessed to them, that they would be able to actually be, as they grew. That's why they started from 1 year old and everything else, but just their overall wealth and longevity that would actually be provided with that. So when he said the amount of 1,365 shekels of what God called redemption money. So that's what they needed to redeem the 273 that was there. So that's chapter 3. Chapter 4 goes on to talk about, once again, the duties of the Kohathites. And they talk about those that are fit for service. So we're talking about, once again, people that actually can do the job. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, take a census of the sons of Kohath from among the children of Levi by their families, by their father's house, for 30 years old and above, even to 50 years old, all who enter for service to do the work in the tabernacle of meetings. So God wanted to make sure that this is heavy, laborious work. You got to think about them disassembling all the parts and pieces. And you know how God was specific about how he wanted certain things made. So these things that were made actually were not light. We talked about the candlestick that was made. It's all solid gold. So we're talking about heavy things, and you have to have strong people that were actually able to do this. So this is why it was so important that he talked about these people at 30 and 50, because they were considered at the prime of their life, combining not only physical strength or brute strength, but also wisdom at this point. So this is why it was critical that there was the evaluation of those that could actually do the job. Then he goes on to talk about the work of packing the furniture and the utensils of the tabernacle. And it says, this is the service of the sons of Kohath in the tabernacle of meetings, relating to the most holy things. Now, you know, these are the things that God had ordained to be made with specific measurements and diagrams and weights and things like this. And he told them everything that needed to be there. And when the camp prepares for journey, Aaron and his son shall come and take down the coverings and the veils and to cover the ark of the testimony with it. Now, the reason why that Aaron and his sons had to come in, because later it talks about the different things, the table of the showbread and all of the blue cloths that have to be done, and the red cloths and the purple cloths that are used, because they were the only ones that could handle the holy items. No one else was ordained to do that. So only the priests, which would be Aaron and his sons, were actually allowed to handle this, because we know what happened with the Ark of the Covenant. Because if you were not ordained to do that, that you would surely die if you touched that Ark of the Covenant. So we have the service of the sons of Kohath, but they had to wait until these things were properly packed up. And it goes on and it says, on the table of showbread, they spread blue cloth on it and put it on the dishes and pans and bowls and the pitchers for pouring. And the showbread shall be on it, and they shall spread them over a scarlet cloth and cover them with the covering of a badger skin, that they might insert uh, holes. So they can't touch this stuff at all. So they have holes in the badger skin so they could loop these holes, these poles through the holes so that they could actually carry it. But they could not touch the content. The badger skins were strong enough to hold the content, but this is how they would have to transfer all these things. And they had to break down the golden altar and all of that, and they spread the blue cloth over it. And then they had to use the badger skins for the poles again. And then they put the blue cloth and continuing to carrying the beams. And they also took the purple cloth, that the ashes that were there, that when they got ready to take from the incense that were actually burned, they had to carry them in a specific way. So there was nothing that was unorganized here, that God had not preordained these people for specific tasks. And that is the same thing for us. God has preordained all of us for specific tasks. And we can't just take things and say, oh, it's not important. Everything is important of what God has called you to do, because there is specific purpose for him calling you. And then it goes on where we talked about everything being covered, and the care that was necessary for everything that was carried. We had the lampstands of lights, we had the golden altar. All of these things had to be transported. Then we go on to 15 to 20 that talks about moving of the furniture and the utensils of the tabernacle. And once again, we have the sons of Kohath shall come and carry them, but they shall not touch anything that's holy, lest they die. So as we go through this, and it says, the appointed duty of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, is the priest, is the oil for the light, the sweet incense, and the daily grain offering, the anointing oil, the oversight of all the tabernacle, of all that is in it, and the sanctuary and its furnishings. So the manager has to make sure that everything is in sync and everything gets moved and checked and balanced to make sure everything as it's supposed to be. There was no cutting corners with any of these things. And it had to be handled as delicate cargo because you could not run the risk of damaging anything. That's why the priests took so much time wrapping and insulating. They didn't have bubble wrap then, but they had the skins of animals that would actually cushion the things as they actually go through transport. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Do not cut off the tribes of their families of the Kohites from among the Levites, but do this in regards to them, that they may live and not die. When they approach the most holy things, Aaron and his son shall go in and appoint each of them to his service and his task, but they shall not go in to watch while the holy things are being covered, lest they die." So this was serious. This was serious that the most holy of holies, if they were not anointed to do this, that their lives were basically on the line. And so they wanted to make sure that these people could do their job, but not risk their lives in actually doing this job. So then when we go on to uh, 21 through 23, now we just talked about before the actual job of the Kohath. Now we're going to the Gershonites. So this was the other son. Now, one of the interesting things here is that usually in um, biblical days, the firstborn child is the one that would have all the prestige. But here we see that it happened a little different, where the Kohath had been elevated before Gershon, which should have been the first to be elevated. But there was a mix, God elevated him instead of the elder son. But we see that still he actually used all of them as well. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Also take a census of the son of Gershon by their father's house, by their families, from 30 years old and above, even to 50 years old. You shall number them and enter them to perform the service, to do the work in the tabernacle of meetings." So they had their assignments. They were being tested for fitness of service. And when they did the actual census, there was noted 7,500 male that fit the description. And then there was a second count that was required to see the number of sons Gershon had that were of the age to serve the tabernacle. So out of that 7,500, as we remember before, they start counting at 1 month old. So we know that they were not of age of service at that point. So we're looking for, those that were older to actually serve. And then it goes on to talk about their actual service. Um, the actual word, or also who entered to perform the services. So the people that came, they had to take on the mentality that at all costs they would defend and protect the tabernacle, because they were saying the word to perform the service are, as the margin tells us, literally to means to war and warfare, or the warfare. So they had to be able to be ready at all times to defend the honor and the sanctity of the tabernacle as they move through different places. And if strangers approached or even threatened, that they immediately had the right to take their lives. And the duties of the Gershonites. This is the service of the families of the Gershonite is serving and carrying of the curtains of the tabernacle of the meeting with the coverings, the badger skins, it screens, the doors of the tabernacle, and the cords and the altars and all of the furnishings and the services that were all made, and so they shall serve. So they had specific tasks as well. They were located with one particular aspect of the breakdown, and this is what they were responsible for. And when we actually look at everything they're responsible for, you have to remember that when God assigns us stuff, that we have to handle it as holy. We can't just haphazardly handle things and not make sure that it gets to the destination. If it's a word that God gives us, if it's a holy word, that we're supposed to deliver that word with care to make sure that it gets to the appropriate location. And this is the analogy that I looked at with the temple, you know, that how it was so important to departmentalize every particular aspect of it, and it just lets you know that God uses a lot of different moving pieces to pull things together. And so when we go on, we look at what they were assigned, and then we end up looking at this part. Now, before Eleazar was actually uh, managing, but here now we start to see that Ithamar is actually in charge of the Gershonites. So then we go on to the duties of the Meraris. And then, as the sons of the Meraris, you shall number them by their families and by their fathers, and the same thing, 30 years and above, and you shall have a number. Their numbers of males were 6,200. And then they had to do the second cut because of the children that are actually in that. And then they wanted to come out with the ones that are 30 to 50 because those were the ones that were fit for duty, that they actually were mature enough to handle. They were they had the brute strength to do the actual hard labor because this was not easy. You know, you think about it when you see someone taking down a circus tent. Think about how many people it takes. Once you see it, it's beautiful when it's up, but the takedown, it takes a whole lot, and every piece has to be put together and stored correctly, or you run the risk of damaging this thing and it's no longer valid. So this is what they're going on here. And then they go to the same thing where each man will actually carry something, and it goes on and says um, that they would carry bars, pillars, sockets, pillars around the courts, their socket pegs, cords with all their furnishings and all their services. And you shall assign to each man by name of the items he must carry. Now this was a little different. He said everybody's name was on what they were carrying. Now, isn't that something like God does us? We all have a name in Christ, and that what He's instilled in us, the gift, the precious gift that He lets us carry, that He knows our name. And I just thought that was so interesting in actually uh, looking at this. And then when you go on a little further, because Merari, the particular group that was carrying here, had to be composed of some very strong men. Because when they start to talk about it, the Merari were called to pack and transport the boards, the pillars associated with parts of the frame and the structure of the tabernacle. So they were responsible for the skeleton of the tabernacle. And this was the important work because these things were covered with all the precious metals and different things like that. But the interesting thing that they talked about was that it weighed over 19,000 pounds. So that was a lot of weight to be moved, and they were moving weight on this one. And the interesting thing that they were going through is that every piece to that was so special that every one man was assigned a particular piece to carry to make sure that it did not get lost. You know, like sometimes when you're packing stuff, you just throw everything in a box. No, that is your job. If it's a cord, you're going to take that cord to where we get to where we're going because that's what you're responsible for. So then it goes on to talk about the summary of the census for the Levites. It was the final count of the families. And then it says Moses and Aaron and the leaders of the congregation numbered the sons of the Kohathites by their family and by their father's house in 30 years old and above, even to the 50. And then it goes, and everyone who entered The service of for the work in the tabernacle of the meeting, and those who were numbered by the family were 2,750. Then we had the same thing that happened with Gershon, excuse me, where they talked about who the people that were actually census, and it was those people that were 30 years and to 50 years old that they were actually doing, and those that were fit for service, and they actually entered the number at 2,630. And then it went on to Merari, the same exact thing, where they were going on talking about the measurement of the census for those people that met from that 20 to 50 age. I mean, excuse me, 30 to 50 age that were actually set and able to work. And they actually ranked at 3,200. Now we know why they would actually have more, because the assignment, you can see, was necessary because there were more parts and it required more brute strength to actually move the skeleton of the tabernacle to actually make sure that it got to get in one place without injury. Then it says, all who were numbered of the Levites, whom Aaron and Moses, the leaders of Israel, numbered by their families and by their father's house, from 30 years old and above, even to 50 years old, everyone came to do work of service and the work of bearing burdens in the tabernacle meeting. Those who were numbered were 8,580. So that was the conclusion of all of the Levites going through the census with them, actually looking at the assignments. They understood the assignment. It was very important for them to be in the places that they were. God realized that the priest could not do everything by itself. It's just like our body. Our head can't walk anywhere. We need our legs. Our arms can't reach out for anything. We need our arms. So it's all of the part of the body that's working together in harmony that actually makes the finished product. And this is what we see in the example that we have here in chapter 4, where God has broken into pieces people from every aspect, but yet they still act and work as one body. Thank you so much for being with me um, this evening as we talk about these things were according to God's commandments. God commanded these things. And God is an orderly God. He's not a disorderly God. And we just thank you for being with us. At this time, I've talked about this wonderful God, and maybe you might be saying that I'm not aware of him, or I don't know him, or maybe I would like to get to know him. You know, it's very easy, very easy. You can ask him, I believe you, Father. I believe you. I believe that you died for my sins. I believe that you rose again. I believe that you ascended to your Father on the third day. I believe that you're coming back for me. And as much as that, say, Lord, come into my heart and save me. And it's just that easy. Not a whole bunch of words that you have to say. Because, see, God is a relational God. He wants to know you, He wants to know your heart and just how you submit to Him. So, if you find that that's you, just repeat those words. Jesus, come into my heart. I want to know you. And it's just that simple. If you have maybe a prayer request or just any questions that you might have, why don't you put it in the chat? And we are constantly praying. We will pray with you. We will pray for you. If you need to contact us directly, you can actually leave a message there and we'll be back, because what we are doing is kingdom work. We're going through the Bible in its entirety over a whole entire year so that we can understand the Bible chronologically and what actually took place and when and where, so that the story gives us better insight of what was going on, and we get to see the bigger picture of who God is. It's about time. Have a good one. Meet us here again tomorrow at 6 o'clock. God bless you all and have a great evening.